Aloha, everybody. Good afternoon. My name
Hi,
is Kaliko Castillo. I'm the president of the Minority Cannabis Business Association. I'm joined by our comms manager, Precious, here. What up, Precious? How's it going?
what's up, everybody? Thank you guys for joining us. How you doing?
Doing very well. We're excited to be bringing you guys the very first daily dose. This is going to be us coming to you live every day on LinkedIn for a few minutes to talk uh, trending headlines, things that we are, are kind of bubbling up for us on a day-to-day, things that we're talking about here at MCBA, so that we can get the feedback from you guys too. So we want to be able to hear feedback from you guys, make sure that you guys are chiming into the chat. We have other folks from MCBA, our operations manager, Samantha, who will be able to pick up questions and be able to send them over to us, and we can be able to answer them. But today we actually have a headline straight out of marijuanamoment.net. Our friend Tom Angel and Kyle Yeager over there got a headline entitled California is providing $15 million in grants to support local marijuana equity programs. So this was a really interesting sort of article for us to see. This actually is an extension of a previous program or grant allocation, but this is for the newest fiscal year, 2022-2023. We'll read a little bit from the headline or from the article itself, and then we'll go ahead and kind of open it up for some discussion. But it says here from marijuanamoment.net, California officials are accepting another round of applications for grants to support local efforts to promote equity in the marijuana industry. The Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GoBiz, announced on Monday that it is accepting grant solicitations for the Cannabis Equity Grants Program for local jurisdictions for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, with plans to use cannabis tax revenue and to fund new and existing equity programs for those who have been disproportionately impacted by the drug war. So, if you haven't sort of heard about how this works before, this is basically grants that are coming from the state into local jurisdictions in California who are actually building out local level social equity programs, right? So, one of the things you might have seen in our National Cannabis Equity Report that we put out a few months ago, and you can check out at our website, which is minoritycannabis.org/equity map. But then you can actually download the full report. But California is an example of a place that does not have a state level equity program. And therefore it is up to jurisdictions like Oakland, who led the way out there in California, to actually put together these local programs. And this grant allocation would actually help fund those programs. I'd love to be able to open this up for a little discussion. Precious here, who is our comms manager here at MCBA, is also an operator out in New Jersey and working on getting licensed and is doing a lot of this sort of work of actually figuring out what it's like to open up a business on the ground and kind of see what where the rubber meets the road. But I'd love to get, Precious, your feedback a little bit on, just the idea that we have these programs that are now being funded from the state level, but helping really the local jurisdictions that are choosing to do the right thing when it comes to building out social equity programs.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like when we really thought about social equity, went from the East Coast, when you watch how it really formed on the West, you really saw that Oakland was like that center hub for social equity really being born. And how that city itself kind of like took it into its own arms and said, hey, we're going to be able to provide resources, training, and funding to different equity operators who want to be in the space because it wasn't there and it was needed. So up until the time the state is able to even provide more grant funding to that, I really just think it's important. And it's huge to empower these municipalities to be able to then provide further funding from a state level. I think it's also trying to attack what is happening in the California market with a lot of products still kicking out to the legacy market and to many other different places because of the high taxes that they're experiencing, because of the multitude of other operational hazards that's making it pretty tough right now to operate in California. So you have to say to yourself, as the governor, as regulators, well, what can we do to really empower more folks to stay in business on the regulated side, while also making sure that those who need these resources the most have access to it? So I think the $15 million grant funding is super important. And I think it's what other states on the East are expecting to happen from the new green rush that's happening in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Virginia, and so on and so forth. Vermont is that revenue that you're generating from the industry will circle its way back to support entrepreneurs in those communities. So again, there's really no number to say exactly if this is going to save the whole social equity game. No, but I do think 15 million is a good start.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's a good start for sure. And actually, when I was looking back through this article a little bit, it actually talked about how, because this was the second round of funding, it actually went down a little bit from the previous allocation. So reading back again from marijuanamoment.net. GoBiz started accepting applications for an earlier round of grants under the program around this time last year, with a total of $35 million made available for localities across the state. This year's funding cap is set at $15 million, right? So I just wanted to sort of like highlight the fact that like it's great that they're doing this. It is a great first step, but also it just kind of shows how we have to kind of keep our foot on the gas, right? And really continue the local lobbying and really working with local elected officials, whether it's state representatives or county or city representatives as well, making sure that people realize that like it's really hard for folks, even having a level playing field, for folks who maybe don't have a lot of the issues that folks from our community have when they're trying to start a business. Even for those folks, it's hard to be able to run a cannabis business, but to start up without, coming from the legacy market, without a business background, without connections to big money, right? Without a college degree, oftentimes, like you find that like it really does matter that we have these programs set up that people can actually have access to capital. I don't know if Precious, you can even talk a little bit about just access to capital, right? You're somebody who's currently trying to build a business. Can you talk a little bit about what it looks like to actually try to build a cannabis business and what it would cost and what it would take to start up?
Yeah, it's definitely what they say when it's just kind of like you really do have to find a way to create a business where you're showing future investors or anyone who you want to support that this will, stand the test of time, and that is investable, number one, but that money just isn't sitting around. Cannabis money is actually more on the low end right now, and it's actually getting expensive. I never heard the saying money is expensive until really coming into the cannabis side. But when we don't have typical access to grant funding, when you're on a new market where we typically wait for the tax revenue that's happening from the industry to support us, which means then you're waiting for the industry to really get into its mid-maturity. And for someone who wants to attack it at the beginning, I'm like, well, I can't wait for the industry to start to roll and then plan to get the benefits of it. I want to get the benefits of it at the beginning. So you have to go out there and pitch. You have to go out there and raise capital. You talk to different VCs and angels, and you try to find these grant programs. But again, in a lot of these new states, they're waiting for the market to turn to be able to provide that type of funding we're seeing in California and in other places to support businesses. Is actually written into our state regulations that is the game plan. A percentage of revenue from sales for cannabis will in turn support small and minority entrepreneurs, will in turn fund them. But how long is that? That's something our report also pulls out, our National Cannabis Equity Report, and actually calls a red flag on that and says there should be funding at the very beginning. The state should actually find a way to provide funding no matter when tax revenue plans to start for cannabis, to actually empower folks at the beginning to join just anyone else to participate in the market. And then I also like to turn into education. Like, I think there's a lot of education that happens on the legislative side. These legislators, especially on a municipal level, have the big task of saying, okay, which businesses need to be funded now that they're going to be the ones allocated with that grant money. So them understanding really social equity, them understanding the importance of small businesses being able to, have extra funding for payroll, which also was usually a big thing for marketing, just to distinguish yourself, especially if in a mature market. These things go a long way. You need to have smart legislators there who understand the importance and how to break down and how to divvy up this funding to support entrepreneurs. So the capital raise is definitely difficult, but it's doable. I say that all the time. It's doable, it's doable, it's doable. And it's good to see the government stepping in when they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to obviously give a plug for MCBA. For those who may be just joining us on LinkedIn, don't know a lot about us, the Minority Cannabis Business Association has been around since 2015, really being one of the leading voices when it comes to policy advocacy around social equity, really trying to provide the resources for entrepreneurs, Black and brown entrepreneurs, to be able to grow their businesses and talk about what Precious is, do what Precious is talking about, which is, go up against the odds, but really be able to succeed, because it is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And it's possible when we're all working together to be able to pool our resources and our collective knowledge together. And that's what we like to do at MCBA through, our regular policy resources that we're putting out, or our networking events that we are doing, or our educational webinars and that sort of stuff, because really we believe that knowledge is power and that should be spread amongst all of us. So we could keep talking about this for a long time. One more point I want to make, though, about this particular article as it relates to the grant program is how, I'll just read one more little line here from Marijuana Moment. article, GoBiz announced in July that they've awarded 78 grants to organizations throughout the state that will support economic and social development in communities disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. The amount of funding and number of recipients for that program increased from last year's levels when the state awarded about $29 million in grants to 58 nonprofit organizations through the Cal CRG program, right? So two things I wanted to highlight there. A, that the need is not decreasing, it is increasing, right? So even though we are just starting, the need is going to continue to increase as people understand that they can get access to this industry and know that like they can come out of the shadows with less fear, right? So this does show that the demand is going to increase, but also the importance that like even these really awesome grant programs are not directly always getting money to the actual entrepreneurs themselves, right? It's really awesome that 35 million last year went, 15 million is going now. But that doesn't mean that all 15 million is going to people like Precious who are trying to start a business. It means that it's going to these well-intentioned nonprofit organizations that are setting up programs, technical assistance programs, other things to be able to help entrepreneurs, which is very much needed in that ecosystem, right? But the money and the funding is still needed for the entrepreneurs, right? Yeah. So just wanted to make sure that we're highlighting that this is really awesome, but it does not mean that all of that money is going to the businesses.
And listen, this industry is growing. There's more to it than operators. When you think about the ancillary side, the professionals who are in cannabis right now, and that's where funding also needs to be supported. So it's super dope to see those organizations who are going to provide those resources, educational training. You know, we cannot talk much about education. I remember a time when you're like simply Googling, you know, how to get into the cannabis industry, and it felt like you were on the dark web. It felt like you were like navigating through the dark web to find just basic resources. So I think the more this is made available, of course, the need is going to demand, because people are going to be like, wow, I finally have a chance to find out this information. So again, I would like to say kudos to California. It doesn't get everything right. Doesn't get, you know, we're still working on it. It's still there, but I'm always a person who likes to look at the glass half full. And I do think this is continuous of the work that a lot of the advocates who are boots on the ground in California and in those specific municipalities that's seen the true harm from the war on drugs. I think this is fruits of their labor. And I know they have a lot more work to do as they're trying to stabilize the industry there, but we definitely want to keep highlighting that.
Shout out. I wish we had like a list of credits we could start rolling on the screen here, because there's a long list of folks who've been doing all of the work on the ground to actually make these things possible, right? Because they don't just magically happen, as Precious was talking about earlier, needing to educate the folks who are actually making these laws. They spent their entire careers not learning anything about cannabis, and then we've got to teach them about everything, including social equity, in a very small time frame. But one more shout out for that's why we need folks to be joining MCBA. I want you to be able to go to minoritycannabis.org, check out information about our membership, and check out our resources, because it's really important that we have organizations like MCBA at the table when these rules and these laws are being written, to make sure that Black, Brown, and Indigenous business owners continue to have a seat at the table and ultimately are at the center of the legalization discussion. Anyways, I appreciate you joining us, Precious. We're going to start doing this daily, 4:20 Eastern, the daily dose with MCBA here on LinkedIn Live. So please make sure that you're tuning back in. Make sure you go to minoritycannabis.org. Precious, is there anything else you want to leave folks with today?
No, I'm just about to get my favorite little strain, grab my weed stress ball, and get back to it. We appreciate you guys. We will catch you back. Also, if there are any topics that you want us to cover, you want to chat with us about, if you'd like to even join, be sure to email us. You can email info@minoritycannabis.org or myself, precious@minoritycannabis.org. We'll also drop it in the comments. But we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Aloha, everyone.